Hey there, race fans. It's race day, top 5 with me, Frank 5. Happy New Year. Happy new race year, everybody. Welcome to 2023. I'm back and I'm ready for a brand new racing season that kicks off tomorrow with the Busch Light Clash at the LA Coliseum for a new NASCAR season. I'm so excited. 3/4 of a century NASCAR has been around. This is the 75th anniversary, 75 diamond years of NASCAR competition. And I cannot wait for the brand new season to kick off tomorrow and 2 weeks from tomorrow with the Daytona 500. We got a lot of storylines entering this year. So let's get into what I think are the main storylines entering this new season. Number 1, Joey Logano comes in as the defending NASCAR Cup champion, looking to go back-to-back. Logano last year, very strong, very consistent. Kicked off the season by winning the Busch Light Clash at the LA Coliseum, the first time we ever did the event. Then he carried that with some solid stage wins at Daytona. Didn't get the victory, but he was still a relatively good car despite getting caught up in a wreck. Then he got his first win of the season at Darlington when he got a little bump and move out of the way move on William Byron for an incident on a restart previous. Logano ended up winning the race. Byron was not happy about that whatsoever, but Logano did win and ended up locking his spot in the playoffs. Then we went to Gateway for the first time ever, and Joey Logano held off Kyle Busch for the victory and what became his second win of the season. Then after that, Logano was running okay, but not contending for race wins for the most part. It was mostly a summer dominated by Chase Elliott and other race car drivers. But come the playoffs, Joey Logano showed up when it mattered the most. He was very strong in the first 2 races of the round of 16. It helped him advance to the round of 12, and then he advanced through the round of 12 to the round of 8, and he kicked off the round of 8 with a win at Las Vegas in a thrilling battle in the final laps of that race with Ross Chastain. Logano was the first driver of the drivers in the round of 8 to punch their ticket to the championship 4. And he would battle the championship 4 against Chase Elliott, Ross Chastain, and Christopher Bell for the title in a race that was mostly dominated by Joey Logano, leading the race and leading the other guys pretty much the entire time. Some of them gave him a run, but they just couldn't get to Logano and get to him when it mattered the most. Logano's car was just too strong. In the end, he captured his second Cup championship. Of course, his first came back in 2018. And last year, he not only got himself his second title, but got Paul Wolfe, who was in his third year with Logano at the time, as his second title as a Cup crew chief, the first being with Brad Keselowski back in 2012. And this year, Joey Logano is trying to do something that has not been done in the new format that we introduced back in 2014. Win the championship in back-to-back years. Yes, 2 drivers have won 2 titles in this format, and they are Kyle Busch in 2015 and 2019, and Logano in 2018 and last year. No one's won back-to-back. Nobody's won back-to-back championships since Jimmy Johnson won 5 in a row from 2006 to 2010. Logano's going to try to change that this year, and as strong as he is and aggressive as he could be, I have a good feeling that he will be in the title conversation come the playoffs later this year. He will definitely make the playoffs. He'll be a contender, and he might possibly be one of our championship 4 contenders when we go to Phoenix in November. But we have a long season ahead of us, but Logano's going to be really tough and really strong this season, in my opinion. Number 2, the next-gen car. Last year, we introduced this new car, the Gen 7 car, the next-gen car, whatever you want to call it. And I got to tell you, that car provided some phenomenal racing last year. It was so good in the super speedways, which we were all wondering, would they mostly run single file the entire time because we saw in the duels? No, when we went green flag for the 500, they were side by side the entire day, battling it out. Some good racing and good slingshots for the most part. And it was very durable race car for the most part. And when we went to the short tracks, we expected some good racing. It was okay. Not great, not bad. It was just okay. I feel like there's things we have to look into this car, and hopefully the news and notes that we got from a year ago about this car on the short tracks can help provide some better racing this year. The big shock was what this car did to 1.5 and 2 mile tracks. Literally saved every single one of them. It was so good. The racing was so good with this car on the 1.5 and 2 mile tracks. Auto Club, phenomenal race. The best I've seen since 2014. Vegas, really good. Atlanta race where they bunched them up in packs, basically. Really good race. The Coke 600 was one of the best races, in my opinion, of the season because of the comers and goers, the slipping and sliding, cars out of control, cars spinning around. It reminded me so much of the 05 race, even though we didn't really have a photo finish like Jimmy Johnson and Bobby Labonte had at that time, but it was still a really good race for the most part. Ran 5 hours. I literally went to bed after midnight because of that race. But it was some good racing with this car on those tracks last year. Kansas was really good as always. The one track where it didn't show up was Texas Motor Speedway, and we all knew that that track's been a problem in the past. And there's been talks lately about maybe redesigning to a short track or like Atlanta Motor Speedway, which is like a super speedway type event. I don't know. We're going to find out in the coming years, but we had some good races with this car last year. The one thing that was a concern was when cars, the back end hit the outside wall, drivers in the car get yanked forward, and it kind of developed some medical problems with them, like concussions. It had to sit Alex Bowman out for a couple races. It pretty much ended Kurt Busch's Cup Series career, sadly. But this car has been sturdy. It's been competitive at all the racetracks that we went to a year ago. Let's hope that it repeats the same thing in 2023, and hopefully with the changes we made at the back end of the race car, no driver will get concussed more than likely ever again. So let's just hope for that. But I'm excited for year 2 with this race car. Number 3, 2 new venues that we're going to. Well, one of them is an old friend, shall we say. And that venue is North Wilkesboro Speedway. Yes, we are returning to that racetrack for this year's All-Star race. It will play host to the 2023 NASCAR All-Star race in May. And it's great to bring back an old friend. We haven't been to North Wilkesboro since 1996, where Jeff Gordon won the final event there. For the most part, the last few years there, it's just been sitting there with no action pretty much whatsoever. But last couple years, we have actually tried to get it back with some of the late model cars running at that track. Dale Earnhardt Jr. even competed in one of them. And this year, they announced that they are bringing the track back to the sport as home for the All-Star race. Maybe could open up to a possibility of a Cup Points event in the near future. Don't know, but we're glad it's back. We're really glad to have it back, and it's a short track, and we all know short track Saturday night is the best thing to have with this racetrack and any short track that you go to. It's just great action for the fans and for the drivers, and we're very excited to get back to this track this year. They're not repaving the racetrack, for anybody wondering. No repave job for this racetrack. They're just keeping it the way it is, but they think it's still going to be durable enough for these cars and the tires that they're going to put on it. So I'm looking forward to watching this event come May. And then on 4th of July weekend, we are going to a new venue. We're going street course racing. Yes, we are racing in the streets of Chicago on 4th of July weekend. Something that's been talked about the last couple of years is NASCAR getting into some street course racing like Formula One has done with the Miami Grand Prix last year. They're doing it in Las Vegas later this year. And of course, IndyCar has done it with, Belle Isle and Detroit, Michigan. They've done it in the streets of Toronto. So NASCAR's like, why can't we do it? So we are going to put the Cup Series and the Xfinity Series together in the streets of Chicago on 4th of July weekend, July 2nd. And the area that it's in, for anybody wondering, it seems to be a relatively good area. It's like in a park area for the most part. The one thing I was worried about with this race is, how is it in the area? Is it safe? Because there's been a lot of stuff in the streets of Chicago for anybody that watches the news. I don't want to get too much into that, but it's in a good area from what I understand and did my research on. So I'm looking forward to what this venue provides, and we'll see what our road course specialist could do in a street course. It'll be very fun. Let's hope the safer barriers keep everybody safe for the most part. Number 4, new faces in new places. We've got a lot of them this year. Probably none bigger than one of the most polarizing drivers of the sport. This year, Kyle Rowdy Busch has a new home as he is driving for Richard Childress Racing in the 8 car. The last few seasons, Kyle Busch has been in the Joe Gibbs Racing number 18 car, winning races, battling for championships, winning 2 of them, and being one of the most consistent yet sometimes polarizing figures of the sport. But last year, they hit a bump in the road when M&M's announced that they would not return to the team in 2023. So Kyle Busch was basically trying to find a sponsor. He was in the last year of his contract with Joe Gibbs Racing, and he said, if we can't find sponsorship, it probably would be going elsewhere. So in the middle of August, he announced that he would not be coming back to Joe Gibbs Racing, and in September, the week leading up to the final elimination race of the round of 16 at Bristol, Kyle Busch announced that he is signed with Richard Childress Racing to drive the 8 car, replacing Tyler Reddick. And this is a pretty interesting thing because if you all remember back in 2011 and late 2010, Kyle Busch and Richard Childress did not get along whatsoever. Kyle had run-ins with Kevin Harvick at the time. He had run-ins with Jeff Burton. He had run-ins with his truck drivers and everything. And that led to a lot of incidents, particularly the Darlington race with Harvick and Busch in 2011, the one that Regan Smith won. And Kansas weekend where Kyle had altercation with Cale Gale, and that led, or Joey Coulter, excuse me, and that led to a post-race punch apparently that Richard Childress applied to Kyle Busch, where I think there was a quote that said, "Hold my watch." So when Kyle was actually introduced by Richard Childress last year, when he introduced Richard Childress as his owner, Richard Childress presented him with his watch. That's pretty creative. But these two, I think, will be a good pairing, and it can help Kyle, Richard Childress, the whole team, and Austin Dillon, because Richard Childress Racing has not been competing for championships the last few years, other than Ryan Newman's 2014 run. They have not been a championship caliber team whatsoever. They've been at least a good team, but they haven't been a championship team like they used to be, especially the days when they had Dale Earnhardt. But I think Kyle Busch can help turn them around and get them back to where they need to be at the top of the sport. So we're going to see what Kyle does for this team this year. And he's got sponsorship. He's got Cheddar's Kitchen on his car. He's got Alsco uniforms, 3Chi. He's got sponsorship this year. That's the good thing. And Kyle Busch is not new to Chevrolet. He drove for Hendrick Motorsports in his early years as a Cup driver and an Xfinity driver. So it's good to see Kyle Busch back in the Chevy camp, and we'll see what he can bring to the table to this team this season. Now, as for Tyler Reddick, he was with RCR last year, but in a press conference or media thing last year, he interrupted Denny Hamlin's media interview to announce that he had signed on to drive for 2311 Racing in 2024. Well, because of Kyle Busch announcing he's going to RCR, and because of Kurt Busch's retirement from the concussion he sustained, Tyler Reddick has jumped ship early to 2311 Racing to drive the 45 car, replacing Kurt Busch and being a teammate to Bubba Wallace. I've got faith Tyler Reddick's going to do really well here, because this team last year had its best season ever. Kurt Busch won at Kansas. Bubba Wallace won at Kansas later in the year. Both of their cars ended up getting to victory lane last year. And of course, Ty Gibbs ran a couple races in the 23 car and the 45 car for the majority of the latter half of the season. So I think Reddick's going to do really well here. He got his first 2 Cup wins last year at road courses, Road America, which we're not going back to this year, and the Indianapolis road course race. So I think Reddick's going to do very well at 2311. Will it be a challenge? Yeah, because he's never driven a Toyota before. He's been mostly driving Fords in his truck days and pretty much Chevys in his Xfinity and Cup days. This is a different manufacturer for him now, but I think he's going to do very well at 2311 Racing. Now, as for who's going to replace Kyle Busch in the Gibbs entry, number 18, well, that would be Joe Gibbs' grandson, defending Xfinity Series champion, Ty Gibbs. And the number's been changed to 54, his number in the Xfinity Series. He's got sponsorship coming with Monster Energy. He's got Interstate Batteries. This kid is a very talented race car driver, and we've seen it the last 2 years, but we've seen him have some run-ins as well with other drivers that's led him to be also a polarizing figure. His run-in with Sam Mayer at Martinsville, his run-in with Noah Gragson at Road America and other places. He is a great race car driver, but sometimes he can rub people the wrong way, shall we say. But he's got a lot of talent. It'll be a challenge for him this year. Yes, he did run the latter half of the Cup season last year, filling in for Kurt Busch, and he did a good job for the most part. But this is a big challenge with a full season on him, and still a lot to learn. But we'll see what this kid could do. He's going to be a future Cup star in our sport. It's just going to take some time with him in this car. And as for his rookie competitor, it will be, you guessed it, Noah Gragson. He's jumping ship to drive full-time in the NASCAR Cup Series this year in the number 42 car for new renamed team Legacy Motor Club, which used to be Petty GMS Motorsports. It's now Legacy Motor Club, and I'll tell you why it's changed that name in a second. But Noah Gragson is jumping to the Cup Series this year. He's run some Cup race before with the Daytona 500 last year for Beard Motorsports. He's now in the 42 car this year as a teammate to Eric Jones. He's got some good crew chief on the top of his pit box and a good crew. And this team had some good runs last year with Ty Dillon behind the wheel, but I think this Noah Gragson kid could do very, very well with this organization. Now, the reason this team's being changed to Legacy Motor Club is because we've got an old face back in the Cup Series. None other than 7-time Cup Series champion Jimmie Johnson. He's back in the Cup Series as a part owner of this team, and he's going to run a third car in a couple races this year, starting with the Daytona 500. Now, he'll have to qualify because he doesn't have a charter for this car, and a Champions Provisional no longer included in the NASCAR rulebook for Cup races. It's applied in Xfinity trucks, but Cup Series is different with the charter system. But it's good to have Jimmie Johnson back. Spent the last 2 seasons driving Indy cars and also some races for the IMSA WeatherTech cars, mostly at the 24 hours of Daytona. But I'm excited to see what Jimmie Johnson can bring to the table in the limited races he'll run this year. I think he'll make the Daytona 500. The speed is there. They'll make it. No problem whatsoever. But it's good to have Jimmy Johnson back in the Cup Series. Another face back full-time in the Cup Series is AJ Allmendinger, as he announced that he will be driving the number 16 car for the entire season this year. Last year was multiple drivers. AJ Allmendinger, Noah Gragson has drove some races for them in the 16 car, and Daniel Hemrick. But this year, they're going with just Allmendinger in the 16 car as a teammate alongside Justin Haley. And Allmendinger has some really good runs in this car that he had last year on the short tracks. The road courses nearly won Circuit of the Americas till he had a last lap incident with Alex Baldwin that resulted in Ross Chastain winning the race. But Allmendinger, it's good to have him back, and he's got some good equipment, and a lot of people say he could be the wild card to make the playoffs with the road courses on the schedule, with the short tracks, because he's really good at those. Allmendinger could make the playoffs this year and maybe make some noise like he has the last few years down in Xfinity Series. So we'll see what he does, but it's good to have the Dinger back in the Cup Series. And we also have Ryan Preece back full-time in the Cup Series after running some limited races the last few years with many teams. David Gillen Racing, drove some races for BJ McLeod Motorsports, and a couple races for Rick Ware Racing last year at some events like the Coca-Cola 600. He's back full-time in the number 41 car for Stewart-Haas this year, replacing Cole Custer, who's going back to the Xfinity Series just to, try to get his confidence back. He has not been really that impressive since his Kentucky win in 2020, shall we say. Ryan Preece has proven himself in the lower series to show that he's a caliber driver if you give him the equipment. And this is the best equipment he's ever gotten. He entered the sport driving for JTG Doherty in the Cup Series, which was okay, not great, not bad, just okay. I think he'll do very well with this opportunity at Stewart-Haas Racing. They've got a good young race car driver. Well, he's in his early 30s, but he's still relatively young, shall we say, and I think could do very well in the 41 car and help the team in general, because they've struggled the last few years, but they can, with this guy, they can make some noise this year. So glad to see Ryan Preece get a big opportunity with this team. And Ty Dillon will be driving for Spire Motorsports this year in the 77 car, replacing multiple drivers that they had last year, like Josh Bilicki. He'll be a teammate alongside Corey LaJoie. And I think with the veteran presence of Ty Dillon, the team can probably, up the ante and be, more competitive this season. So it's good to see Ty Dillon still in the Cup Series. And Alex Bowman is getting a new crew chief this year in Blake Harris, replacing Greg Ives, who's stepping down to be with family. He's getting Blake Harris, who was Michael McDowell's crew chief a year ago, and gave McDowell his best statistical season ever. If Blake Harris could bring that magic to Alex Bowman, they could be a championship contender, because Blake Harris knows what he's doing. So a lot of faces in new places this year. It's a lot to process, but we're excited to see a lot of these new changes this year. And number 5, the end of an era forever. 2014 NASCAR Cup Series champion Kevin Harvick announced last month that this 2023 NASCAR season would be his final one. He will be retiring at the end of the season, looking to spend time with Delana, with the kids, and more than likely become a NASCAR broadcaster in 2024. Kevin Harvick's story in the sport has been unbelievable. Started out in the Xfinity Series, won races there, and in 2001, of course, the tragic death of Dale Earnhardt at the Daytona 500 resulted in Kevin Harvick taking the seat, what was then the 3 that became the 29 car at Rockingham. In his third race, he ended up winning at Atlanta in a photo finish against Jeff Gordon, which pretty much introduced us all to Kevin Harvick, and that he was going to be able to at least do a good job in the 29 car. And had some good moments, won the Brickyard 400 in 2003, won the Daytona 500, one of the closest finishes ever against Mark Martin in 2007. He's done a lot of it. Had a close finish against Jamie McMurray at Talladega in 2010, won the Coke 600 while Dale Jr. ran out of gas on the last lap in the final 2 corners in 2011. He's won a lot of big races. He hadn't really been a championship contender, though, in that time. He could never win the whole thing. But then he jumped to Stewart-Haas Racing in 2014. In his first year, he won 5 races and the championship in the introduction of the new format and what was one of the most competitive seasons in NASCAR history with the drivers that we had at that time. And he continued to be contender in 2015, finishing second, 2016, 2017 finished third, 2018 finished third, 2019 finished third again, and in 2020, he and Denny Hamlin were the dominant cars of the season, but unfortunately, Harvick's bad run in Martinsville didn't allow him to make it to the Final Four. And in the last 2 seasons, Harvick has not really been the Kevin Harvick we've been known to watch win races. He went winless in 2021 despite finishing 5th in the standings. He could never get to victory lane, and he had his run-ins with Chase Elliott in the playoffs. And last year, they were struggling at the beginning of the season, and it looked like unless if they win, they're not going to be able to point their way to make the playoffs with how the point system was going at that time, with everybody else winning at that time. But Harvick was able to pull through with 2 wins at Michigan and Richmond, and that locked his spot into the postseason. I'm like, here we go. Here comes Kevin Harvick, playoff time. Well, the opening round didn't go well for him. Parts failure at Darlington, which he called out NASCAR for. Crash at Kansas. Late miscue at Bristol, which took him out of contention for the win because he had a car, I think, capable of winning that race. It just didn't work for him, and he just really had a struggle of a year last year. This year, he's closing out his Cup career for his final season to basically thank the fans, thank everyone that's been with him his entire Cup career with RCR and Stewart-Haas Racing, and just create one more big memory. It would be pretty cool if Kevin Harvick could win the Daytona 500 for a second time, win the Coke 600 for a second time. He's won the Southern 500 before. He could win it a second time. He could win at the Brickyard again. He could maybe close out his career with another NASCAR Cup Series championship, because Kevin Harvick is a first ballot Hall of Famer. Let's get that out of the way. He's been one of the best drivers in the sport. He's also been polarizing at times with having an attitude and, driving it over his head, but he's also one of the most talented, aggressive drivers we've ever seen. And we thank Kevin for all he's done in the sport, and we're going to miss him after this year, but let's share one more ride with the Busch Spear number 4 for one more season. Kevin Harvick, forever. Kevin, we wish you the best of luck on your final season. Make it a good one, buddy. Enjoy it. So that is the top storylines for this 2023 season. I am so excited for this new season. And don't forget, it kicks off tomorrow with the Busch Light Clash at the LA Coliseum. We had the event last year. It was a real, hit it out of the park deal. It was a great event, and we're excited to have it again this year. Don't forget, catch coverage tomorrow, 4 p.m. for NASCAR Race Day. The heat race is at 5, and the main event begins at 8:20 p.m. Eastern, only on Fox. Leave a comment down below. What do you think about this upcoming season? What do you think is going to happen? Who's going to live up to expectations? Who do you think is going to surprise? And leave a comment down below. Who do you think is going to win the championship? Who's going to be the championship for? I'm so excited about the season, guys. 75 years of NASCAR. And we are ready for the new season to kick off tomorrow. I cannot wait. And I cannot wait 2 weeks from tomorrow for the Daytona 500. So thank you so much for watching. Subscribe, like, and one more thing, everybody. Because the new season is just around the turn, I can officially say this. Let's go racing!